So want to move and pivot immediately into our next discussion here. When we're moving through the small businesses and things that they could do to truly help themselves out, low cost, and really trying to dive into things that are topical yet highly debated. And this is one of them, is cyber insurance. Everyone who runs a business has a massive amount of insurance that they need to potentially take a look at and carry. Insurance, liability insurance. You end up having the insurance for your employees that you're going to have to take care of. It's just insurance is name of the game. The entire industry is sitting there with its hand out, say, give me your money. So one of the questions that a lot of small businesses have is, is cyber insurance truly worth it? This panel is focusing on to insure, not to insure, debating the value of cyber insurance for small business. I'd like to go around the room and going to check here real quick. From the stance perspective, you guys could stop sharing the slides. That way we focus in on a larger, here we go. We could see the panelists a little bit more in focus here. So I'm going to go around the room here and basically have each one of you introduce yourselves and what you're representing from the industry to be able to discuss the cyber insurance. So we'll go from right to left. We're going to go to Anjula. If you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for having me on the panel. My name is Anjula Agrawal. I'm a physician, internal medicine, adult medicine, and a solo business owner. I want to make it clear, I don't pretend to be a cyber insurance specialist or industry leader. I'm coming from the angle of a business owner and fitting cyber insurance and cybersecurity and cyber threats into my practice.
All right, and she was asked to specifically represent a lot of the views of the standard small business out there. Someone who is saying, should I carry this or should I not? And trying to focus on it from that angle. All right, next is Gabriel Galvan. By the way, Gabe, apparently we have a mutual friend, Matt Beagley. He and I were just talking about you last night. You guys are in the MBA class together, so amazing. He says hello. I just had drinks with him last night. He just randomly was looking you up on the panel. He's like, I know that guy. So we have a mutual friend.
I think you had more than one drink if you were with Matt, but that's another story. Anyway, great guy and a great student in the MBA courses, by the way. Gabe Galvan, I started a company 2.5 years ago called RevTech Solutions. I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area. I spent the last 15 years of my professional career at the MITRE Corporation, and I actually started my career early on with IBM for well over a decade. I got interested in cybersecurity quite a while ago, but in the last probably 10 years or so, I focused quite a bit on critical infrastructure protection and looking at risk and how is risk being managed for critical infrastructure. And that really kept me not only in my later years at MITRE working on that theme, but even in my current firm, RevTech, we're focusing quite a bit on looking at the whole area of risk measure and how is that going to evolve. So that's my interest today. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And last, we have Isabelle.
Hi, thank you for having me, Rob. Isabelle Dumont. I'm currently working at Carbel Cyber, a cyber insurance company that's focused on small and medium-sized businesses. I've been in cybersecurity for about 13 years, coming from the technology side, and what I feel is needed the most support right now is really explaining and translating all the complexity of cybersecurity to small business and business owners so it can become something practical for them. And I felt that cyber insurance is a little bit of that linchpin in going from security to risk to how do you manage risk and what does that mean for a business. So I've been in cyber insurance for about 4 years now.
Excellent. All right. So for the attendees, this is where I'm going to actually ask you guys to become a part of this panel. So number one, we're going to have the Q&A that's going to hit the normal Q&A location. But while you're thinking about questions asked the panel, there's a couple things I'm going to ask you, the audience, to participate in. So to kick this off, go and click the sharing here. So this is an interactive, what we're going to see here is just go into that, scan that QR code, and it's going to bring you to a website, and it's going to allow you to vote, who you are. And there's multiple poll questions and questions we're going to be going through here in just a little bit. But while you're starting to answer some of these questions, so it's going to help inform the panel about who the attendees are and what's going on. And this, you kind of see this live, interaction that's going to be going on here of like the who's who of who's currently on board listening to this. So one of the things handing over to question is, how does cyber insurance really work? And so while everyone's filling out this question, I'm just going to go back to the panel here just for a little bit. How does it work? What happens when an organization with a cyber incident and they need to involve the insurance? So, who would like to take that?
I can probably start because that's what we do days in, days out. So basically, when a business and organization recognize that they might have a cyber incident, sometimes it's not that clear. Their recommendation and the way we've trained them is to call their insurance agent or to call us if we're their insurer as soon as they discover anything, so that we can work with them to really assess if it's really an incident, or if it is already acknowledged as an incident. We'll go through the following process. We'll immediately, and when I say immediately, it's like within an hour, we'll assign what we call a breach counsel to represent them, because as their cyber insurance legally, we can't represent them. They have to have a representative. And then we'll also, based on the first facts we know about what happened to them, whether it's a ransomware attack, whether it's a invoice manipulation, whether it's business email compromise, we'll actually assemble the best team of responder to help them stop the propagation of the incident and also recover from it. So that's, and we'll pay, once we assemble that team and obviously the invoicing start to come through, we'll pay those invoices on their behalf.
Okay. Anyone else, also want to, talk about it, from your perspectives as well, you could also tie into, so what are some of the myths and things that we need to debunk about what cyber insurance is for small businesses, especially? It sounds like even defining what it is sounds to be challenging. Why is that? Anyone would like to take that, Anjula or Gabe?
I think it's very confusing. It's a newer area of insurance. So I'll tell you personally, I have business insurance, and it does have cyber insurance, but a small portion, which is more business interruption. For me, I also need the regulatory coverage, the HIPAA, specifically HIPAA, the Health Information and Portability and Accountability Act for my patient care. So I would say it's very confusing for me. I actually would have to have 2 or 3 different insurance coverages. So I think that's where the industry can help educate us. And every business needs specific or to their business coverage. And so you have to really personalize it to your business. So it's very complicated and confusing at this point. I hope that programs like this, the summit, is going to help us be more educated as business owners to be able to determine what type of insurance we should cover, how much, which type.
And I would add that it's, if it's a very small company, sometimes let's say your IT assets aren't that great, but cyber insurance and cyber risk is really about information risk. So you have to really think about, you don't want to judge your need for insurance based on maybe your IT footprint per se, but rather what's your critical data and what are you doing, and what are your what indeed are those risks of your clients and you and your stakeholders. So you need to think of it in dimensions that aren't just sort of how many laptops and desktops and mobile phones that we're using out there.
Yeah, I would add to Gabriel's point that the probably the highest cost we see in any cost of an incident is business interruption.
Yeah.
It's like how many days you can afford to be out of business without really jeopardizing your business. So that's probably the biggest factor.
So
And I'm not sure if you guys listened to Lisa's initial talk this morning. She said she was discussing one of the criteria in order to get it recognized as an incident was the $5,000 threshold. But what you just mentioned there is also actually business interruption is something that you could account for as loss of revenue that accounts for that $5,000. You know, a lot of people don't know that, and it's crucial that they do, because just taking your hand off the gas and the steering wheel to focus on an incident and it potentially reduces revenue because you cannot serve customers, it's part of the incident cost. And it's interesting that people don't know that. And you know, it's like depending on law enforcement or whoever they're interacting with, they're saying, no, it's a cost of you know, getting, like she was saying, the forensic service and stuff like that, which is also true. But you know, her point there is a lot of business owners are like, well, that just looks complex. Like, how do I just get back to serving my customers? So, you know, add on to that question here. We end up taking a look at the people that are, you know, in attendance here. Does this surprise you? You know, that we have a lot of cybersecurity consultants, obviously, on, you know, watching this because they want to serve this industry. But, you know, we have a lot of employees, but we don't have many owners in comparison, you know, to that. But I guess that also, you know, you have a lot more employees and owners, you know, that they'll be in there. Anything in here surprise you for the demographics that are listening right now?
I think the cyber insurance industry, how low that is.
Is that because, you know, I'm just curious, is that because the small business market is not, you know, as great a target for them?
I think it may not be a target for many, but I do believe in my conversations with people in the industry that many do recognize that that is a great area for them to pick up profitability and market share. And that comes with the idea that ultimately to get ahead of the cybersecurity difficulties that we have as a nation and as a world, really to be proactive, we've got to go to high automation. And ultimately that high automation can translate into low touch solutions that then allow the small businesses to be part of that ecosystem and get the benefit of automation. And therefore, I think that there is a big market for insurance companies to focus on the small, medium business.
I can add to that it's a fairly nascent market to offer cyber insurance to small and medium-sized businesses. Typically, cyber insurance started with very large companies, and they're not very well equipped to actually serve the small and medium-sized businesses. And I want to go back to Anjula's comment that there's so much education to be done. You know, the market started with the cyber insurance policy being really, really hard to understand. The insurance agent who distribute those are not always educated as well. So that's probably why you don't see that many on this program. So there's a lot of education, a lot of awareness, and really bringing back to the basics something that can appear very complex at first, both in terms of value, what it is, what it's covered, what's the various aspects, and pretty much everything.
I also think it may not be a priority for small businesses until you have an issue. You know, there is an expense. I would say even just I outsource IT to do monitoring. That's about 5% of my overhead. And then I have business insurance, which includes some business interruption cyber coverage, which is another 4%. So then if I add regulatory cyber insurance, add more to that. I also think that I wasn't even interested possibly in cyber insurance and looking at the issues until I personally experienced a ransomware attack in 2017. So when it hits you close to home, you really, you you don't understand the ramifications. You really don't understand it until you experience it, which I would recommend nobody experience that or try and mitigate prevention and insurance risk assessment. All of that should be done.
Yeah,
You'll see
and
what I've thrown up here on the screen because it ties into this. You know, we started off with the discussion primarily asking, it's like, you know, what is it, and you know, what are some of the myths surrounding it? So I'll go to Gabe on this. Is, you know, one of the questions that you asked this team when we're prepping for this is, you know, why is cybersecurity so difficult to manage for small medium businesses, and then layer that in with some of the responses that you're seeing here as it relates to cyber insurance and the way people feel about it. Because this is just a word cloud that we're asking people to like type in, saying, you know, when you think about this, and what is that one word reaction that you have here? So tying into your to the thought you had earlier is, you know, why is it so hard?
Sure. Yeah. You see expensive, of course, front and center, right? So it ties into the issue of affordability quite a bit as I think about it. And you know, the cyber attacks, cyber threats don't discriminate on size of the organization. Additionally, what would be maybe a pervasive attack on the Pentagon in this week can easily be transitioned to a small shop retail organization next week. And so there's that fluidity between scale that really has nothing to do with the size of your business. Plus the fact that small businesses are made up into the ecosystem of supply chain of the larger organizations. So this really kind of drives into this issue of affordability. And I think what's going to be required in the market, and we'll see it materialize over time, is cyber insurance has to exist. It has to exist for that last mile, that most important mile for each and every entity that's in business. They'll define what that risk is for them. But what it has to be is balanced with the good care and feeding and what's done by the organization itself and its traditional people, processes, and even its technologies to make sure there's a standard of risk mitigation. Some of this is translated into good cyber hygiene, for example, that small companies need to have and be aware of, just like the large companies. But all this really ties into the fact that affordability is going to be the issue. There will be cyber products that will be affordable for the small business and will be needed by the small business, but that's counterbalanced with the fact that those small businesses also have to make it part of their priority as to what they provide as a minimum standard of safety and security. And it's only with that two sides working the equation will this industry flourish, I think.
Right. Isabelle, one of the things that you continually see in here is it looks like you and your cowbell have a little uphill battle here. Is there anything in here that's surprising to you, or is this, you know, pretty much, yeah, this is what we encounter when we are talking to people about insurance?
This is exactly what we encounter, so no surprise there. I'll go back to the basics and some of the things that Gabriel said, which is how much can you afford to really be out of business? Also, I think things have changed quite a lot in the past 4 or 5 years. I think everybody in the industry, including us at Carbel, we go out of our way to really educate everybody on like what are the various facets of cyber insurance. It's not just you know, helping you when you have an intrusion on your computer, but there's the invoice manipulation, there's social engineering, there's we do cover for regulatory penalties and so on. So there's it takes quite a bit of time, and I would advise everybody to, if you've not been in touch at all with cyber insurance so far, start by asking your insurance agent when you renew your general liability, just like, hey, would it make sense for us to get cyber insurance? Help us. What can I do to understand my risk? That's step one. Do a risk assessment and know where you are. One of the things we do at Carbel is give you a quick way to measure for free how you stand compared to your peers. You know, we have on our books many medical offices, and so we can compare you with your peers and give you an indication of how you're doing.
And Angela, any final thoughts on that? And just a reminder to the attendees, we're switching over to your questions here in just a few minutes. And then if you have a specific panelist that you would also like that question to be asked to, please put it in the Slack channel, and we're going to start going through that. And again, really engaging you as we're trying to do here on how the panelists like look and react to the data as it's coming in real time. So Angela, any final thoughts on that word cloud before we talk about, now we have their feelings on it. We're gonna actually see, okay, despite your feelings, are you still buying it? That's where we're gonna be heading into next. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Isabelle is saying. It's education. I think a lot of small business owners, they don't even know what's covered in the insurance they have currently. And so I think they need to contact their insurance broker provider and really drill down and see what is it that they have and what is it that they need specifically for their business. So I do think that's what I did. And I think it's important because I was actually surprised what I had coverage for and what I didn't, and then what pieces I need to add on to the coverage.
Right. I'll go back to Gabe. I mean, despite the cost of and complexity of this stuff, I mean, right now it looks like half of our attendees are either in the maintain, and then the other half don't do it. But we don't see anyone voting at this point will never do it. So, what are your thoughts on that? Just like on this immediate stat in comparison to what you were talking about and discussing earlier.
Well, I think it depends on the size of the company and what they're doing, obviously. But clearly, if they don't have cyber insurance, they need to have that baseline of good hygiene first and foremost, because that will help them get the right insurance at the right price for them, right? I don't think Isabelle's firm, Cowbell, will necessarily want to sign up somebody that they can't quite quantify what the risk is of that concern. So they want them to have good hygiene and good practices in terms of how they manage their information security. That's essential. And so that the 47% or the do not haves, the 37% that do not haves, I would hope that a large number of them are indeed thinking and working on the practices they have as a company to build the characteristics of managing information securely. And with that, they should feel confident then going to Isabelle and the market to find out how they can fill the gaps that exist to mitigate the risk from what is in effect a real danger. The statistics keep reaffirming that we're not winning the battle on cybersecurity. We're actually losing the battle, and there's more and more. It's just, in fact, the last few years has been a shift a little bit, maybe from what were usually the attacks in the financial market, for example, over to the healthcare market and the energy market. So the nefarious actors are out there, and they're working hard, and they will come to your door and my door. It's just a matter of time. So I think that's what's important to do, is to really figure out that baseline of what you need to do as a small business, and then go talk to your insurance brokers, talk to Cowbell and others, and find out what indeed they can fill as a gap to mitigate that risk for you, that last mile, as I call it.
Yeah,
I agree. I think one of the things in a small business is I don't have a cybersecurity department. I'm outsourcing IT, which that's a third party. There's a risk involved possibly with that. So small and medium-sized businesses are probably at higher risk and easier access for cyber threats. So we may actually need more cyber insurance and risk assessment than other larger organizations.
That's also fair. Kind of a last question before I go to attendee question is one that, I just thought of, is that, a lot of folks out there, we just almost generically talk about the threats, but are there, and then this is for y'all's experience, having looked at this for quite some time for both the providers, the consultants, and as well as those who are going to be buying it. Are there certain types of incidents that are much easier for cyber insurance to help out on? And what are they? What actual specific incident types that if hey, if you get hit with this, then this is like almost too easy for us to go on and get an assessment and do a payout or help you with recovery. Like, what are those?
Isabel, I
So,
think you're probably the best to answer.
yeah, let me take that. I was just thinking a little bit through. I would start by the other end. The most complex I by far the ransomware attacks, just because there's so many components to it. And the business is very often under pressure to get in a place where they can operate again. Ransomware is very disruptive. It requires our teams to go and negotiate with the bad actors, the ransom, and so on. So there's a very often a long tail of activity related to that. But I would also say ransomware is the one where we're as the cyber insurance, where we've been the most successful at helping our policyholder with. Because a lot of it, especially in a small business area, it starts with a malicious email that someone clicks on, and you can train people efficiently on that. And you can work with them to put in place backups and really have the tools to minimize the impact of a ransomware. So like we have a service as part of our policies that offer a risk audit to our policyholders. And it's been proven now that we've done that for 2 years, all our policyholders who've gone through a formal risk audit with our teams have not experienced a ransomware attack. So there's basic things to put in place, training, awareness, training about malicious email and so on. So that's kind of at the most complex side. On the other side, there's easier transaction, like, if there's invoice manipulation, for example, someone made you transfer funds from your bank account to a malicious account. Those are fairly, there's nothing is easy, but those are pretty well-defined procedures to go after that and really evaluate, okay, is it covered, is it not covered, and recoup the amount in that regard. So, and then everything in between. Typically what we classify what's covered in 3 major categories. First is the first party loss, that would be loss of revenue or loss of funds if you had a fraudulent fund transfer. The second one is first party expense. It's like the forensic, the breach counsel you would have to bring on board to help you recover from the incident. And the third category is third-party liabilities, which is anything you might owe to a third party because of damages due to cyber incident, including penalties from regulations. So depending on the type of incident, you might have there might be costs associated with all 3 or not. But that's a good way to think about it and start to think where you might be the most at risk.
Right. Anjula, Gabe, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
I agree with the risk assessment. So if any insurance that you have right now, you should do a risk assessment, and that may be your business liability insurance. That's a place to start, to have an audit possibly. And then actually not just do the audit, but make the changes that are recommended, obviously. And for me, as a small business, it's mitigating it. Once the horse is out of the barn, it's a mess. So you really want to try and do what you can beforehand, as the previous speakers really spoke eloquently about.
I would just add, when you do that risk assessment, think of your stakeholders, think of the third parties. Sometimes small businesses don't realize what they really are part of in terms of the ramifications, the other incidences that occur when a breach happens, and who else is impacted in that, and how other breaches from third-party stakeholders, part of their supply chain, can impact them. So those assessments need to be holistic in their views.
Well, talking back to what one of the questions Isabella had, and then there's also a question from Chris Anderson that's also basically talking about claim success, but I'm going to also tie this into, she talked about ransomware being very complex. The payout is the question, both back to the entity as well as you have the cyber criminals. where's that line? How often does cyber insurance actually pay out, either to the insured or even to the criminal organizations? I don't even know, how often cyber insurance, might be able to say, hey, listen, I have a cyber insurance, but, being ransomed, someone needs to pay them. I need my data back, otherwise I'm done. Like how often is that successful? What is the payouts that, these organizations get? So I'll first ask Isabelle, also ask Gabe his perception on this as well, from what he's seeing out there. Is like, it seems like, okay, we're insured, but getting that money out of the insurance seems to, the perceptions there. I just don't know the truth behind it. What are y'all thoughts on Chris's question?
Yeah, I can start with some of the data we have. To be clear, when a ransomware attack happen, the first thing we do is really to try to understand, like, what are the systems impacted and so on, and is there an alternative way to help the business get back on its feet. And that's where we work very closely with our policyholder. Many of them have followed our recommendation to put backups in place and so on. And we where we are right now, we found that we don't have to pay ransom in more than 25% of the cases to get the business back on its feet. So it tells you that if the organization put in place a lot of the basic cyber security hygiene has been discussed today during this summit, there's a lot of ways to get out of paying a ransom. And insurers, we're not against paying the ransom. It's just like overall, as a general economy, it's not a good thing to pay ransom and give money to the bad guys. So I think it's a win-win-win for pretty much everybody when we work with the policyholder, do the risk assessment with them, help them put in place what needs to be put in place. And we're working with a lot of partners in the cybersecurity side, so that when there is an incident, it's not just like you prevent incident, but it's also when there is an incident, you minimize the severity of it. I think there's a lot to be done there, and it's very effective.
I think Isabelle's brought good perspective on what's happening today. I will say that in earlier years, it was quite shocking how many people who were attacked would actually pay and not go to their insurance company or let others know that they had been attacked. And I got a good view of this data about 4 or 5 years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago back. And it was quite amazing, the very single-digit percentages of companies, and these firms typically could afford to pay. A little bit different from the smaller companies that can't afford to pay. But in those days, at least, a lot of companies would rather pay and keep it quiet and not put a claim into the insurance companies. And I think things have gotten better, but there's still a big ways to go. And so I think that's an interesting statistic.
All right, moving to another question. Those are excellent answers, by the way. This could be for Anjula, even though I know you could easily go to Isabella or Gabe here as well. But the reason I'm asking her is from the perspective of a small business owner. Danielle's question is, what are some of the typical requirements that, you were asked to comply with just to be able to obtain cyber insurance? I guess, in parallel, like, how's that compared to what you're required to do to maintain HIPAA?
So I think that's an interesting question, and Isabelle might have more knowledge on that. So really, the insurance companies, especially when we look at the regulatory insurance, the HIPAA that I would need, they don't audit. We have a questionnaire. It basically goes through just some really, I think, basic questions. And then they spit out, this is the cost for your insurance over the year. So
it's not enforced, is what you're saying. It's almost
like
it's not enforced. It's almost like your own homeowner's insurance. Do you have an alarm system for your home? And no one actually comes up and double checks it, right?
Right. So I think that could be. I think that I could get a lower premium once they came out to my practice or business. So that, I think that would be something that would be worthwhile at some point to really fine tune so that more small businesses would want to spend that overhead on the insurance. But giving, it's like car insurance. If you have less tickets or accidents, your insurance goes down. So I think that that's something that would help. I think small business owners maybe participate more in signing up for cyber insurance and for more cyber insurance. So I have some cyber insurance, but I can keep getting more. So that's the question, is like, what is the amount that you want? Like, I want the most I can get, but the most bang for my buck, right?
Isabelle, do you also want to talk about the requirements and are they enforced? Is this like Anjula is saying, it's more in practice only, or do you get into the audits?
Yeah, so I would say things are really rarely enforced because of how much can you check, but we do a pretty good everything we can get automatically so that it's really frictionless for us to assess a risk. We do, and using systems and so on. When it comes to requirements, I think it's pretty much standard now for all cyber insurance to demand multi-factor authentication, MFA. And I know the discussion prior to this one was about password and really basically everything about good password management. There's a lot, we also demand backups, which should be pretty much a standard everywhere. We also have businesses put in place incident response plan. What we found is that the going back to the question of severity, it's not just about preventing a cyber incident. It's about when one happens, minimize its impact, and getting businesses ready with a plan in place. Like, who do you call? What's the first step you take? Who should be involved? Who should not be involved when you discover that something went wrong? Can go a long way in building. I would put all of that under the resilience of the business, so that when something bad happens, I assume a lot of businesses have that for other bad activity. So why not for cyber? Know who to call. Be ready for the time of crisis. That goes a long way, and we help with that.
Isabelle, so I completely agree with everything you're saying. For my business, we have a very transitional workforce, so we can have all the protocols in place, but it's onboarding, continued education, continued risk assessment, because what you think when you get audited or you do the risk assessment, that may not be where you are a month later. So I think it's just continued vigilance and also educating your employees.
So I think this is an area where technology and advancements need to really be making breakthrough, because a lot of it is self-attestation in terms of what one has in a company and what they don't have in a company. But ultimately, you do want to get to a point of some sort of continuous monitoring so that the business is always sort of at the ready, but also the ones providing the insurance, the underwriters and the risk, the premium companies coming in with the carriers with the policies, that they too have confidence in terms of what was in a self-attestation is really factual. And so I think this is an area for possible great improvements in the industry to trickle down to the small and medium businesses.
All right, so we have a question from Tyler. And so this is one that actually had a lot of folks, do a thumbs up or a high five on this, which is, what are the insurance companies doing to help make this type of insurance less ambiguous to any type of business, whether that be large or small, business size? So on the word cloud, that the ambiguous nature of this is a factor. What are they doing to help it make it less ambiguous? And obviously this probably, but I also recommend from Gabe and Anjula's perspective, what you would recommend to the insurance companies if you had the ear of those executives.
I mean, I think it's education, but simplifying it. I'm not in the industry, so it really needs to be simplified, but I think it needs to be personalized. So my medical practice is going to be different than another business. So I think that's what makes it so complicated, is that one size doesn't fit for all. But this is where I think that there just needs to be more information. Just like the summit, that we're educating small businesses, and it just needs to be pushed forward.
So I think my answer is always back to the automation, and use that theme of automation. I think for a company like Isabelle's Cowbell to be putting the premiums out there in terms of what it gives its insured customers, there needs to be some sort of small business doesn't, the business model isn't such that you can have a lot of touch. You can't have a high frequency touch to be effective and to be profitable for companies. But through automation, there needs to be some assurities that that things that people say they have, indeed they have. If they have multi-factor authentication and it's been checked box somewhere in a sheet, okay, that might be true in one part of an organization, but maybe not in every part of the organizations. So ways to automate and to check these things are very, very important. I think that would be the solution for how Isabelle and the industry can reach the small, medium businesses in an effective and affordable way.
So I was kind of hoping at some point during this panel, just because your business name is named Cowbell, but you kind of just hit it. You're basically saying that everyone needs more cowbell to help protect themselves.
Absolutely, we need more cowbell.
That's a Googleable thing if anyone doesn't know the reference. All right, moving on. Okay, so we're right at the end of our panel, and there's a couple of questions that I would really recommend our panelists to go into the questions or speakers and just do a quick reply to any of the ones that we're not able to cover. I really love that interaction, especially after the fact as we're moving into break here. So to close this out, and we'll start with Isabelle from Cowbell, who is, got to have the mantra, more cowbell. So if that's the case, what for each one of the speakers here, what is your key takeaway? What is the one thing that you want everyone to remember from your perspective, regarding cyber insurance? You saw the polls that we did earlier, you saw where everyone kind of stands on it. From your perspective, is like, given that information, here's this, one thing that you want everyone to take away with. Isabelle.
Yeah, so I would combine some of the comments made by Anjula and Gabriel to say, if you're a small business, don't feel like you're immune to cyber incidents. Things are proliferating, and I'm very, very worried about AI and what it's going to give the bad guys to the ability to do, to simulate anybody and everybody doing anything, and trick you into clicking on one of their malicious links. So I think it's a good time right now to understand your risk, talk to your insurance broker, and evaluate whether it makes sense for you.
Okay. Anjula.
I'm going to ditto Isabelle. I think you should contact your business insurance broker and really get the details on what you currently have and what you may need for the future. And maybe a personalized one-on-one with that broker to really hone in what you need for your business.
All right, and Gabe.
Do a self-assessment. There are a lot of tools, a lot of organizations out there, CISA and others, that will help you assess your organization and the vulnerabilities that you have. And once you've done that self-assessment, you'll be able to zone in on where you'll need to cover yourself in the risk. And with that, go talk to your insurance company, because that's really the way you want to leverage cybersecurity insurance, is to the most high value portion that really is your risk, and get that coverage.
100%. And from the attendees and everyone else who's kind of in this mechanism of complexity, expensive-ness, ambiguity regarding cyber insurance, it's I really appreciate all three of you coming online today and discussing this, because this is something that unlike where everyone would nod yes about password security and, discuss, what our previous speakers were talking about, two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. This is one that, it's not as clear as how to implement it. What are my benefits? Or again, I get the payouts. It almost leads to more questions and, than anything else. And, trying to create a level of calm regarding that and say, hey, listen, inquire about it, see where it goes. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But, this is something that a lot of small businesses should take a look at, but they still got to do the basic hygiene stuff in order, to prevent having to deal with cyber insurance at all from a, claims perspective. So, both of these things are, when things do happen, you are, this is your net. You got to have this in place. Otherwise, some incidents will take out the entire business altogether, and then you're done. You don't have a business at that point. And it's not a, I've done incidents. I've been involved in talking to people in the middle of incidents where their ransomware attack hits, and it literally is, you bet the business on whether or not that payout to the cyber criminals will actually get your data back. But, as all three of you have mentioned as a part of this discussion, that if they had done the proper cyber hygiene, it would have been a lot less an intrusive decision at that point. And that's one of the reasons why, cyber insurance, could potentially be that springboard to get you back to running state as quick as possible. So thanks for the attendees, Gabe, Angela, Isabella, for joining today. If all three of you can, please jump in the Slack channel and try to answer those questions. If you're not currently in that, just ping the Summit staff behind the scenes. Just make sure you get the link. It's really easy to get in there and to answer some of the questions that our attendees had that we're not able to get to. Thanks, everyone. And thanks again to our panelists. Really appreciate you coming on board today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.